Okay, welcome to the deep dive. We've got this fresh stack of sources right here.
Hmm.
And let me tell you, it's covering an absolutely wild range today. We're
Yeah.
talking huge U.S. policy shifts, international incidents.
Right. But also science breakthroughs, market movements.
Yeah, I mean, even a major cultural event. It's
Yeah.
really all over the map.
It is quite the mix. You definitely get a sense of the sheer pace of things just looking at this list.
Exactly. And our job, our mission here is to dig into this stuff, pull out the really essential nuggets, try and connect the dots.
And figure out what really stands out and, importantly, why it matters to you.
Think of it as us trying to find the signal in all the noise just for you.
Okay, let's just jump right in there.
Yeah, let's do it.
All
Because
right.
the sources kick off with some pretty monumental things happening in U.S. politics and policy.
Absolutely. One of the biggest headlines is that massive tax and spending bill that just passed the House.
Right, the one President Trump's calling the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And what jumps out immediately is that vote count, 215 to 214. I mean, that's as razor thin as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really shows the deep partisan divide.
It couldn't be tighter. And that narrow margin, it's not just a number, right? It reflects this intense battle over, well, fundamentally different ideas for where the country's headed.
And inside the bill, what are the key pieces?
Well, the sources detail some substantial tax cuts. That was a core promise, so delivered there. But they also mention a sharp reduction in climate incentives and new restrictions on health care for transgender individuals. It's a definite shift in priorities.
And the costs associated with this shift.
That's where the global markets really sat up and took notice. Projections are showing this bill adds trillions to the national debt over the next decade.
Trillions.
Yeah, it's a significant fiscal change, boosting defense spending, cutting taxes, but pulling back on funds that were aimed at social programs and green energy initiatives.
How did the rest of the world react to that number?
Pretty swiftly, and frankly not positively, in key financial circles. We saw immediate sell-offs in global bond markets. And Moody's, they took the pretty big step of downgrading the U.S. credit rating.
Okay, so that's not just like financial jargon. That's serious.
It is. It's a direct reflection of worries about U.S. fiscal sustainability long term. Is the house in order, basically?
Right. And the speed of that market reaction really shows how, in today's world, national policy decisions have these instant global consequences.
Exactly. It really underlines how sensitive global confidence is to, well, predictability, especially from the world's largest economy.
Okay, so moving from Congress, the sources also cover a really significant move targeting Harvard University.
Yes, this decision by the Trump administration, revoking Harvard's ability to enroll international students, that's a major development.
Why did they say they did it?
The stated reasons involve alleged collaboration with foreign actors, campus safety concerns, things like that. But the impact is potentially huge. International students, they make up over a quarter of Harvard's student body. That's around 7,000 students. And, many of them pay full tuition. So it hits the university's finances too.
Wow. Okay, so it affects the student mix and the budget. Has there been friction before between this administration and Harvard?
Oh, yeah. This isn't entirely out of the blue. The sources mentioned previous actions, pulling research funding, challenging their tax-exempt status, and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's comment.
What did she say?
She framed hosting foreign students as a privilege, not a right. That sent a pretty strong message about their stance.
And Harvard's response, they're not just accepting this.
No, definitely not. They've filed a federal lawsuit. They're arguing it violates their constitutional rights, due process, basically calling it punitive and without basis.
What makes this particularly interesting, I think, is the potential ripple effect beyond just Harvard.
Absolutely. It's drawn criticism from, well, all over academia, the business community. The concern is it could stifle innovation, by restricting that flow of global talent.
Could it hurt the economy?
Potentially, yes, in the long run. And it might just make future international students reconsider applying to U.S. universities altogether. It definitely raises questions about openness and global academic links.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Moving from domestic policy to global and regional tensions. And sadly, the sources detail a really tragic shooting right here in Washington, D.C.
Yes, a deeply disturbing incident. 2 Israeli embassy staffers, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram. They were shot and killed outside the Capitol Jewish Museum,
And the suspect.
identified as Elias Rodriguez. Reports say he shouted pro-Palestinian slogans during the attack.
This is being treated extremely seriously, I assume.
Well, absolutely.
Very
This is
bad.
under investigation as both a hate crime and an act of terrorism. And the context is important, too. The victims were attending a diplomatic event focused on humanitarian issues, not a political rally.
The impact of something like this feels so immediate and painful.
It is. It's unfortunately fueled existing concerns about rising anti-Semitism. We're seeing increased security at Jewish institutions, calls for better protection for diplomats everywhere. It's a sad reminder of how global conflicts can, spill over into local violence.
And speaking of those global conflicts, the sources also paint a really bleak picture of the situation in Gaza right now.
Yeah, the reports describe a major escalation in Israeli military operations. The sources point to at least 53 Palestinian deaths from these latest actions.
And damage to infrastructure.
Significant damage, yes, including reports of hospitals being targeted. Plus, new evacuation orders are forcing more people out of their homes into what's already an impossible situation.
And this is part of Israel's stated campaign against Hamas.
Correct. It's framed as part of the ongoing effort to dismantle Hamas and secure the release of hostages. But the UN, they're quoted describing this current phase as the cruelest phase of the conflict yet.
The toll on civilians must be just devastating.
It's catastrophic. The humanitarian crisis is deepening constantly. Aid groups are struggling, really struggling, to get supplies in because of the conditions on the ground. And international condemnation is growing as the civilian casualties mount.
Okay, let's circle back to economics for a second, because that U.S. tax bill we talked about earlier, its effects didn't stop at the U.S. border, did they?
Not at all. Global bond markets reacted almost instantly, as we mentioned, significant sell-offs. And importantly, the yield on the 30-year U.S. Treasury bond, it jumped up to 5.13%.
Okay, so for listeners thinking 5.13% yield, so what? Why does that specific jump matter so much?
Well, higher yields mean it costs the U.S. government more to borrow money. Simple as that. So that adds even more pressure to that huge $3.8 trillion debt projection we discussed. It's basically the market putting a price tag on that fiscal uncertainty.
Right.
And the Moody's downgrade, plus weaker demand for U.S. bonds and recent auctions and even Japanese bonds. Interestingly, it all just highlights how nervous investors are about government debt levels right now, globally.
And this isn't just a U.S. problem, then. It has wider implications.
Oh, definitely. U.S. Treasuries are a global benchmark, so it impacts financial stability worldwide. Higher U.S. borrowing costs can make borrowing more expensive for everyone, everywhere. It puts a spotlight on fiscal management globally and could, potentially, slow down U.S. economic growth down the line because more money has to go to just paying interest.
Okay, completely switching economic gears now. Bitcoin. The sources report a major surge.
Ah, yes, crypto had a big moment. Bitcoin hit a new record high, trading above $111,000. Specifically, $111,223.70.
Over $111,000, and that's, what, a 19% jump just this year? And it happened right around the 15th anniversary of Pizza Day.
Yeah, that famous first Bitcoin transaction. Nice timing, maybe symbolic.
Right.
But this surge, it's not happening in isolation. It seems tied to growing mainstream acceptance, sure, but also maybe linked to those very concerns about traditional finance. We were just talking about the bond market volatility.
So less confidence in traditional money, maybe.
There seems to be a bit of that, yeah. Less confidence in traditional fiat currencies, government bonds, as the ultimate safe havens right now. So some investors are looking elsewhere.
What makes this particularly interesting is, well, what it signals about investor sentiment.
It definitely reflects a shift in how some investors think and where they're placing their bets. It also presents a, let's say, fascinating challenge for regulators still grappling with this whole space. This move towards digital assets could absolutely speed up wider adoption and, influence global finance in ways we're probably still figuring out.
All right, moving from the volatility of markets to the frontiers of science and tech, Google's new AI video tool, VO3, seems to be making waves.
Yeah, this is a significant step. Google DeepMind unveiled VO3. It's an AI model that can generate, well, really photorealistic videos just from text prompts or images.
Photorealistic, like with dialogue and sound effects, too. Sounds like a direct challenge to OpenAI's Sora.
It absolutely is. The sources position it as a major competitor, maybe even better than Sora in some aspects. And this tech, it's already gone viral. People are making these incredibly realistic, sometimes frankly weird short videos.
So what's the big takeaway here? Huge potential, big risks.
Both, really. On one hand, think about entertainment, media creation. The potential is enormous, but the speed this is developing at brings serious risks.
Like what?
The realism. It makes it incredibly hard to tell what's real footage and what's AI generated. That's a huge problem for fighting misinformation, for digital ethics. It's like a race between the cool new tech and the potential for it to be misused.
Okay, and from that digital frontier to the literal edge of our solar system, news of a possible new dwarf planet.
That's right. Astronomers have reported finding an object called 2017 OF201. It's way out there in the outer solar system.
What's special about this one?
Its orbit. It's incredibly stretched out, elongated, and it takes something like 25,000 years for it to go around the sun once.
25,000 years? Wow.
Yeah. It's a trans-Neptunian object, meaning it's beyond Neptune. And finding it is significant because it suggests that area beyond the Kuiper Belt might have more objects than we thought, maybe even larger things influencing these orbits.
What makes this particularly interesting, then, is what it could teach us about how everything formed out there.
Precisely. These distant icy bodies, they're like time capsules from the solar system's early days. Discoveries like this one, 2017 OF201, give us clues about planet formation, about the dynamics way out there, and it definitely fuels the hunt for potentially bigger undiscovered bodies in the outer reaches.
All right, turning now to some difficult news from the sources covering disasters and safety. Landslides in China's Guizhou province.
Yes, a really tragic event. Heavy rains triggered landslides in Qinyang Village, a rural area. The sources report at least 4 deaths, and sadly 17 people are still missing.
And that region is known to be vulnerable, right? Mountainous terrain, heavy seasonal rains.
It is, unfortunately. Rescue operations are obviously focused on finding the missing, but it's tough work in those conditions.
What's the sort of broader lesson or implication from a disaster like this?
Well, sadly, it highlights the urgent need for better disaster preparedness, stronger infrastructure, especially in vulnerable areas worldwide. And it also, worryingly, raises those ongoing concerns about climate change, perhaps making these kinds of events more frequent or more severe.
And another difficult report. A private jet crash in San Diego.
Yeah, a truly awful incident. A Cessna Citation II crashed into a residential neighborhood. This was shortly after takeoff from Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport. All 6 people on the plane were killed.
Do they know what went wrong?
The pilot reported technical problems just before the crash. And the sources note it happened terrifyingly close, just blocks from an elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it could have been even worse on the ground. The investigation's just starting, likely looking at maintenance, weather. But there have been safety debates about older private jets like this model before.
What makes this particularly interesting in a somber way is the questions it raises again about safety, right? Older jets, small charters.
It absolutely reignites that debate. This crash is leading to renewed calls for maybe stricter maintenance rules, more oversight for private aviation, especially over populated areas, and the residents nearby. Understandably, they're demanding tighter air traffic controls. It's a critical safety conversation sparked by a terrible tragedy.
Okay, let's try and wrap up the main discussion on a completely different note. Something from the sources highlighting history and community. Fleet Week 2025 in New York City.
Ah, yes, a fantastic event. And this year was particularly special, celebrating the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps.
It sounded like quite a big deal. Ship tours, aerial demonstrations, military bands, lots of public engagement. Sources say tens of thousands attended, showcasing history but also modern capabilities.
Fleet Week's been a New York tradition since '82.
Yeah.
It's designed to connect the public with the service members. And this year, with that big 250th anniversary, it felt, well, particularly significant, especially with renewed focus on national defense lately.
Were there specific historical tie-ins?
Yeah, lots of retrospectives, apparently. Schools got involved, veterans groups, really emphasizing that connection across generations.
So beyond the spectacle, what's the deeper impact of something like Fleet Week?
Well, it definitely boosts public support for the armed forces, helps with recruitment. Economically, it brings millions in tourism revenue to the city.
Yep.
But maybe more importantly, it fosters, civic pride, a sense of national unity, reminds people of the service's role.
Any other outcomes?
Apparently, according to the sources, it also sparked some discussions about maybe increasing funding for veteran care and the importance of preserving naval history.
So practical ripples, too.
So looking back at everything we've covered today,
Oh, wow.
from those big policy shifts and global conflicts to AI breakthroughs, space discoveries, tragic accidents, and these big commemorations, it's been quite a sweep through the source material.
It really has. You get a real sense of the sheer breadth of what's happening simultaneously across so many different areas.
Yeah, and what makes this particularly interesting, I think, is when you dive into these sources, you start to see the connections, right? How seemingly separate events might link up. And you grasp the scale of both the challenges and, well, the progress happening.
Yeah, taking the time to go beyond just the headlines, really digging into this material, it helps you build a much richer understanding of what's actually driving things.
Absolutely. So thinking about everything we touched on, what really sticks with you from this deep dive?
For me, it's the different speeds, the different timescales everything seems to operate on at the same time.
How do you mean?
Well, you've got the instantaneous reactions in global bond markets, right? Or the way that AI video tool went viral almost overnight, super fast.
Right.
But then you contrast that with the discovery of a dwarf planet that takes 25,000 years just to go around the sun once, unimaginably slow.
Mm.
Or the deep, slow arc of history being celebrated over 250 years at Fleet Week.
That is a striking contrast. Yeah, the hyperspeed in the geological time almost.
Exactly. So maybe this deep dive leaves you thinking about that. The challenge of just processing, of navigating a world that's moving and changing on all these vastly different clocks all at once.
That's a really powerful thought to chew on.
Absolutely. And with that thought, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the sources. Thanks so much for joining us.